Welcome to SaharaTV. My name is Rudolf Okonkwo. Our viewers, you must have all been confused about the state of Nigeria's economy. And today, to help us understand what is really going on, we have invited a special guest, Professor Utomi. Professor Utomi is a professor of political economy and entrepreneur at the Lagos Business School. He's the founder of the Center for Value in Leadership and also the founder of the Center for Applied Economics at the Lagos School of Business. He ran for president under the Democratic Congress in the 2011 election. Professor Utomi was also one-time advisor to President Shehu Shagari. Professor Utomi, welcome to SaharaTV.
Thank you very much.
Now, let me start by giving you some of the headlines we've seen in the last few weeks in Nigerian newspapers about the Nigerian economy. One says that Nigeria realized about 600 billion from the partial removal of oil subsidy in January of 2012. Another one says that Nigeria saved 119 billion by closing loopholes that allowed ghost workers to be in the Nigerian economy. Another one says that Nigeria recovered 39 billion from oil marketers out of the 234 billion stolen. There was this one that said Nigeria saved 430 billion by stopping the overpayment of fuel marketers and importers. Now, in the last 12 months, I can count ways that Nigeria probably saved over 1 trillion naira. Mm-hmm. Our budget has not changed much from the last 2 years. Where are this money? Where did the money go? And why are we still borrowing if we are saving all this money?
Well, I think first of all, you must return to that old cliche. There are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. With statistics, you can say anything that you want to say and still sound like you are correct. The truth of the matter is that the Nigerian economy has been going through challenges of different kinds. At some point, those who have authority feel a need to talk up the economy, which everybody does everywhere in the world. At some point, they feel a need to scream that things aren't going well, so that things that appear do not shock people. Now, it is normal to manage perception of an economy. Indeed, I have just finished writing a blog. It goes up on my blog, patitospost.com, tomorrow. And the title of that blog is Nigeria Broke? In that piece, I basically try to suggest that, it is in the interest of everybody to manage perception. For some time now, it has been in the interest of the managers of the Nigerian economy to talk up the economy, to talk about 7% per annum growth rate, which is not incorrect, but you don't have to put 7% growth in the context of it being a jobless growth. And more Nigerians are out of work, more Nigerians are poorer today. So whereas the economy is growing at 7%, true, it really doesn't add up to much understanding of what's going on to get excited about 7% growth. What really truly is going on is that the triumph of politics has allowed such an incredible abuse of the Nigerian economy for a long time now. And it was necessary beginning last year to find something to blame for the way things are because of political abuse of the economy. And so something called oil subsidy was discovered. Oh, it's about oil subsidy. How did the so-called subsidy, quote unquote, jump from 200 and something billion to 1 trillion in 1 year when the consumption of petrol did not increase in Nigeria by anybody's statistics, by any margin that is significant, when the price of crude oil in global markets did not go up, Of course, the simple answer to anybody who manages to make the effort is that cronies were allowed to cut away lots of monies for the purposes of the electoral interest of those in power. And once they cutted away so much money, the leaks were so evident, the trauma on the economy was so obvious that they needed to find some way of patching it up, and the way was to make the Nigerian people pay more. And so it was announced that we are removing subsidies. And this is where I get very upset with my friends at the World Bank and places like that. They know these things are going on. Then they get into these classic orthodoxies of subsidy. And that's why I argued in January of last year that the issue was not about subsidy. It was about transparency in managing the Nigerian economy. It was about corruption. So really what we're dealing with in this current crisis is that Nigeria is losing a lot of money from crude oil theft. But it's not just that crude oil is being stolen, but the process leads to a major damage to the environment. Who is responsible for this stealing? Well, I don't have concrete evidence, but many people think that if they were not connected and powerful, I mean, it would be easy to stop. So, with a lot of money is being lost to crude oil theft, but more importantly, because the pipelines have been damaged significantly, revenues are not coming to the shelves of this world particularly, and because revenues are not coming, they're not being transmitted to the treasury. Government, if we are honest with ourselves, is struggling to find money to share between the tiers of government. The Federation Account Meeting has become a crisis, and so there was need to begin to shout about a problem in the economy. So those who were talking up the economy suddenly became those who were saying, hey, we're broke. And we're broke because the pipelines are being vandalized. There's too much stealing of crude oil. Factual in some sense, but hiding more complex abuse of the economy.
Now, Professor, let me ask you this, because after the Occupy Nigerian movement, there was a presidential panel that was set up, and Ribadu led the panel, and they looked into NNPC. And one of the things they said was that Nigeria lost about 4.64 trillion in the last 10 years from deals that government officials signed with foreign oil companies. And a good example of that is the one that is currently causing a problem that the President Minister for Petroleum, Mrs. Zediane Alison Madeke, signed with Shell Corporation concerning oil block OML 26, 30, 34, and 42. And in the deal, it was said that Nigeria would lose billions to these foreign multinationals. Where is the sense of outrage in all these things when we get these reports and it ends there? There is no reaction there is from the people, there is no leadership from civic society, and things are not really dealt with.
That is really the heart of the Nigerian problem, the failure of citizenship. There is such a dearth of leadership in civil society, and I talk about this so frequently. There is such a failure of citizenship that anybody will get away with murder in Nigeria. Nigeria is very sadly one of the most unjust societies on earth. And it is so because people don't stand up for their rights. People don't fight for what they should fight for. Anytime you stand up and do something because you think that is just, that is the way it should be, everybody who knows you gets on the phone. Why are you complaining? Why you? Why? Look, So, how to get to waking civil society up must be the biggest challenge for us as a country. I mean, most of my life, I have been active in civil society. I look at the next generation, and I am really puzzled as to why they don't get as aggravated with things, especially since they are the ones who have so much to lose. I mean, most of what's going on in Nigeria is really an abuse of the next generation by a generation that had their turn a long time ago, ran Nigeria as 20-something-year-olds, continue to run Nigeria as 80-year-olds, abuse their own opportunities, abuse the opportunity of their children, and are now about to abuse the opportunity of their grandchildren. And yet these grandchildren don't feel enough of a sense of outrage. In our time, we were on the street before the ink was dry on anything that upset us. I was a student leader at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, in 1976. And I remember when the coup that led to Murtala's death, it was announced in a coup attempt because it failed in February of 1976. I mean, the coup plotters were still in charge, so to speak, when we got on the streets and began to demonstrate. But I can't find that outrage. I was a senior executive of a multinational company when the elections of June 12 were annulled. I was actually in the United States, in Boston. I wrote my first reaction to it from Boston, faxed it to Lagos, appeared in the newspaper, and as soon as I arrived in Lagos, I began a movement that came to be known as the Concerned Professionals. And I don't know what's happening to the generation that's followed us. It's a big challenge, I really must say.
Now, in January this year, I want you to help us understand this. A presidential committee on public service reform discovered that top government officials in Nigeria take home 1.12 trillion a year in salaries and allowances out of a national budget of 4.9 trillion. These public officials constitute less than 0.013% of the Nigerian population. How did we get to this place?
I don't know. I was going to say you're preaching to the converted, but that is a subject on which I have written and spoken so much. And I think we shouldn't just be talking about how we got here, because that's medicine after death. My real issue is how do we go forward from here? And the first thing for me is restructuring government. I've consistently argued that the legislative part of our governing structure is a burden on the Nigerian people, that throws up people who don't even understand the meaning of oversight, but see their role as an opportunity to get into this sharing. I have argued that we must have a citizen legislature, a part-time legislature, both at the center and at the state level, and that this should be no more than a unicameral citizen legislature, where the cost of governance will be reduced dramatically by it. I've argued that we must put a cap on executive branch spending in many areas. Most of government, most of the revenues of government really go into recurrent expenditure, and most of that recurrent expenditure is Nigerian public officials wandering around the world, doing nothing, showing up at events that that they don't attend really, just to be able to spend money, get escrowed, as they say. And part of the reason British Airways is one of the most abusive airlines in the world is that their first class compartment is filled up by Nigerian government officials transferring billions of dollars of hard-earned Nigerian revenue to British Airways, while the poor of Nigeria are dying unattended to. We must cut down on, through legislation, through citizen action, movement of public officials, how much they spend on themselves. I mean, if you just go back, I mean, it's not that these things, Nigerian history, does not have different experience. You go back to the 60s, when we had people like Dr. Michael Okpara as Premier of Eastern Nigeria, disciplined people. In the 50s, like Chief Obafemi Awolowo was Premier of Western Nigeria, and the Sadana of Sokoto, when he was Premier of Northern Nigeria, didn't have more than 2 or 3 cars in government house in Kaduna. and the ministers in northern Nigeria used their own private cars and took mileage allowance when they traveled with the premier. Now, today, a typical governor will have a fleet of bulletproof cars in his home state capital, in Lagos, since he's likely to visit Lagos from time to time, and in Abuja. I mean, it is just so scandalous how much public officials allow themselves to spend.
Yeah, Prof. Yeah, I was getting to that because I know you have friends in government, and I wonder, do you know how much a governor takes home as security votes?
Nobody will tell you that. That's why it is called security vote. And one of the things I have argued is that that should be subject to legislative oversight. Um, yes, you don't want to sometimes allow in newspapers the amount of money that is available for security purposes, because there might be attenuating circumstances that will lead to certain kinds of spends. But I think it is unacceptable that we say that nobody should have an idea of this. There should be a legislative committee that is part of government and therefore can be as trustworthy as the governor, if the governor can be said to be trustworthy, and that committee should have oversight over this so-called security vote. In my view, that security vote must be kept to a very bare minimum, and most regular security issues should be spent above the table. What should be allowed for the kind of sometimes necessary activities of government that should be below the radar should be a very small percentage of the budget of any given state. But right now, it is basically seen as a slush fund that the governor can do as he pleases with.
Now, Prof, people are wondering, okay, if you're a progressive like you ran for president, and you were not able to achieve that, why are you or people like you not going out there leading demonstrations? Because we've seen that commentary and making speeches are not making any impact. For instance, if we look at what the people in the National Assembly are making, it's outrageous. What will it take someone like you to go out there and say, we want people to occupy the National Assembly until they are forced to make changes to what they make?
Well, just to show you how banal political culture in Nigeria has become, I was one of those who, in effect, inspired a significant part of the Occupy Nigeria activities of January last year. Indeed, there was not supposed to be any activity in Palomo in Lagos. It was supposed to be a central thing happening at the Ganifa Emi Park. A small group of reapers, young Nigerians educated abroad, because the truth of what happened has not been told. It's been so distorted by governments in their propaganda. A group of young Nigerians, mainly reapers, young men and women who were educated abroad, who had come home and started their own small businesses, and saw how badly the management of affecting them, came together. Enough is enough, and under different platforms, and stimulated most of what was that movement. And they invited me, of course, to join in the process, and I, as a citizen, very quickly responded. But when the group that was supposed to gather around Palomo to get on buses to go to the Freedom Park gathered, and there were only, I don't think the first, there were 10 of us. I said to the young gentleman at that time, just one who showed up there, I said to him, you know what, Kola? I don't think we should be thinking about going to Freedom Park. this area of Lagos, this influential neighborhood called Ikoyi, and they're all sleeping in their homes. Let's wake them up. And 10 of us began to march down Awolowo Road in Ikoyi, and as we were marching, people were sending out stuff on their BBs and their whatever. By the time we marched down Awolowo Road, our numbers had fallen to a couple of dozen, and we came back, and I said, look, let's march through Ikoyi. You go through the homes of these guys who are playing these games, these so-called oil guys, stop in front of their homes and sing. We did that. By the time we were over, we had at least 200 people. The following day, we were in the thousands. On the Friday, Sumi Smart Cole, the photographer, said to me, can you believe what's behind you? You know, I mean, at the point when we were coming, by then someone like Ali Baba had brought his van, you know, with loud hailers, kind of outdoor performance vehicle. And I stood on that van, and I looked back down Kingsway Road, or Alfred Awana as it's called now, and I could see more than 12,000 people. Unbelievable. And Smith McCall said to me, look, I can point to 4 High Court judges in this crowd. And I knew that something was about to begin to happen. By the time we stopped under the bridge in Palomo, among those speaking were senior advocates of Nigeria like Koinsola Ajayi, but you know, Koin had been part of us in Concerned Professionals. There was an awakening of an bourgeois part of the society, and it was just a brilliant thing. And they brought in troops.
Now, Prof, we know how it ended. How the Nigerian Labour Congress sold out the movement. I wanted to ask you about why we can you cannot, like what you just told us, the story how you led this. Why you cannot repeat something like that, even if it's targeted to specific areas of the economy or of the country or political, like the National Assembly. But we are running out of time. I really want to get to some important things also. You also have to acknowledge that some of your friends, people in the Nigerian corporate world, so to say, have been also part of the problem we have in the country. Like we have corrupt bankers like Ibru, Adebola, you know, they contributed to part of the overall corruption going on in the country. And recently, you were star defense witness for accused banker, Mr. Atuche, who was accused of defrauding bank PHB of 27 billion. Now, what can you tell me about some of these people who I know you have relationship with? How do they see their role in what Nigeria has become today?
You see, one of the tragedies of Nigeria is that there's a web of collaboration, and from time to time, the system sets up a prosecutorial lynch mob. And, you know, things are thrown on some people, sometimes really framed, sometimes partially true, and everybody goes in this lynch mood, and there is an obfuscation of truth and reality. And we all get this high. Yes, we've got those people. It is the reason that we are not making progress. Every couple of years, bankers are the worst people in this. They won't speak the truth. They say, oh, I escaped it this time. But they get caught the next time around. See, when the global financial crisis reached its peak, there was an interview of the former chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, Alan Greenspan. When he was asked, how did it happen? And will it happen again? He said, sure, it will happen again. It's human nature. Greed is a major problem in society. Few people have overcome this problem. and discipline themselves enough. And so systems work well, not because they are good guys. Systems work well because you have strong institutions. It is the nature of institutions that lead to boundaries to conduct. And those boundaries to conduct are the things that make investment possible. Because if people don't believe that their property rights are safeguarded, if people realize that anytime some public official who does not like you shows up in a position of power, that they can throw up a mob around you, and you are suddenly casting off, then people will not make investment decisions, the economy will not grow, and all of that. If people's property rights are violated without thought because somebody has power, that economy will never grow. That's why people don't invest in economies like ours as they should.
Prof, I think I know where you're going to. Prof, I think I know where you're going to.
No, I can tell you.
Okay.
Let me tell you for a fact,
Yeah.
Mario Adwa said and did things in my presence that I knew he deliberately pushed the system to go after Bank PHB because his family had a small share in part of what became Bank PHB. And I thought that the truth must come to be told. If not, we go through these games again and again. 5 years, we go through it again and again. And our country doesn't grow because we allow people who have power not to have checks to the abuse.
So are you saying that people like Ibru, that they were not corrupt, that people like Adebola, that they were not corrupt, or just that this is just a case of injustice on one particular person?
You see, one of the things I've suggested is, let's get 3 or 2 major international investigating consultancies, whatever, Pricewaterhouse, whoever, to review the banking reforms in Nigeria. Review all the banks. Do a forensic. If they were to prove that the banks that they went after are worse, really, objectively, than some of the ones that are around, I would like to spend the rest of my life in jail.
All right,
I
Prof,
know that is not the truth.
Prof, we are running out of time. Let me round up. Let me ask you, Ruben Abati used to host a show with you, a current affairs show on TV, and his admirers now feel betrayed and disappointed about the role he's playing with the administration of Jonathan. Are you disappointed too? And do you understand why it's hard for people to trust pundits like you to make a change when they get to government?
Well, I think that it is not fair to judge any population by an individual. Besides, by the way, I'm not so sure, again, what has been, Ruben has been charged with and all of that. I think that you could say that because you have in the United States a few Nigerians who have committed infractions against the law, that all of you Nigerians who live in the United States are criminals. I think that would be inappropriate. Don't you think so? And so that is why the rule of law is very important. That people be put through fair, objective, whether it's trials in the case of, say, bankers, or if it is the court of public opinion, in case, Patito's gang was a completely open show that accepted everybody from every spectrum. And that's the point I'd like to make. It was designed to be a marketplace of ideas. It wasn't a show of good guys against bad guys. I tried so hard to make sure that even government officials, everybody who could be on it, could be there, because I wanted to create a marketplace of ideas. And to say that somehow, if you were unhappy with the conduct of somebody who used to appear on it, that is something about pundits. It's really not particularly smart judgment.
All right. Prof, one last question. I have to ask this before I go. Edward R. Morrow said that difficulty in it's not an excuse that history accepts. And the way things are going, it looks like President Jonathan is poised to argue at the end of his term that the so-called transformational agenda failed or was truncated because of difficulties. Does he know that history does not accept such excuse, do you think?
Well, it was George W. Bush who said history, we are all dead by then. Let's be very fair here. Many of the kind of people who reach the top of public life in Nigeria don't have the preparation to understand the meaning of history. Does that speak something to you?
Yes.
I think that, the structure of the process in Nigeria is that it throws up people whose backgrounds are backgrounds of hustle, of struggle, of survival, and all of that. And power is seen as another arena where the guys who survive, in the hunter mentality, are the guys who have hunted down big game. It's time to sit down, relax, and enjoy the meal. I think that unfortunately the structure of our politics does not allow yet for people who are driven by a sense of how history will remember them to provide leadership in our society, very sadly.
All right. Professor Utomi, thank you so much for coming on our show.
It's a pleasure.
We appreciate that. Coming up next, we are going to continue our programming. We hope you continue to watch us. Stay tuned.